your first film as a director, right?
Yes, I've written it, I'm directing it, and even though I auditioned many actors, I decided to cast myself
as Oscar Wilde.
As Oscar Wilde, I'm saying.
Yeah. All right, so what's the film about? I mean, it's about Oscar Wilde, we know that.
The film is about Oscar Wilde.
But it's called The Happy Prince?
It's called The Happy Prince, and it really concerns the life of Oscar Wilde in exile. Most of the films that have already been made about Oscar Wilde always take you up until the moment that he goes into prison. And for me, the most exciting part of his life is his life in exile as a kind of vagrant. He was someone who was incredible. One of the things that really attracts me to him is the fact that he was a huge star and lived a life of complete luxury, and then by the end he was kind of sitting toothless in an old suit on the boulevard, kind of smelling slightly of urine, and he was a vagrant by the end of his life. So I love that journey.
You will get your Cinemerit Award tonight.
Yes, and I'm a little embarrassed about that, to be honest, because I don't really feel up to this point that I've achieved enough to get it. I mean, it's, you know, I'm very thrilled and excited, but I feel that really I'll deserve it next year or the year after.
We obviously think that you deserve it right now, and you will get it tonight. And we chose a few films that you did over the course of the years also to play here at the Munich Film Festival. Right. One is the very first film which put you on the map, so to speak, which is Another Country, made in 1984.
Yeah, 30 years old last year.
That's right, I remember, and it was yesterday when I saw it in Cannes, so
right.
It cannot be that long ago. But if you think back on that film, it was part of what then has become the new British cinema, right?
Yes.
There was Another Country, you did Dance with a Stranger, a year later, I think, Mike Newell's film with Miranda Richardson.
That's right.
So if you think back to that time in British film history, what did it mean suddenly to have something that could be called new British cinema, and your part in it?
Well, it just all, viewed from today, it feels like another planet, really, you know, because filmmaking has moved along so much and has become such an expensive thing. You know, that film, the first thing, we had a screening of it. It's screening on Friday, and it actually, even though it's a beautifully made film, it was made for £1 million, and its attention to detail in the design, in the cinematography, in the costume, in everything, considering it was made really for what is now no money at all, is quite extraordinary. And it was very moving for me watching it, because it was just, you know, I know when you get middle age you start becoming regretful about the past in a way, but there was a different kind of energy on a film set in those days, because there was no monitor. Nowadays, if you go on a film set, you see there's a black tent next to the action, and everybody is inside this black tent looking at tiny little screens of the action. It makes a kind of detachment between what's happening on a film set and what's happening with the director. Whereas in the old days, or when Another Country was made, you'd walk on a film set and you'd see an actor surrounded by tons and tons of little lights, because there were so many different things you had in those days, and everybody around was like people on a wildlife safari, like watching, because that's the only thing you had, watching the actual thing happening. And you know, there was no grading to do after a film. What you shot was what you got, and so there was what I remembered when I watched the film was this almost sacred kind of thing about filmmaking, which is slightly gone. He and I had been trying also for longer than make the Oscar Wilde film to make a sequel of Dellamorte Dellamore, but we've never managed. The trouble is, the Italian film business is really in a tough place at the moment, and more than even the rest of us, so it's quite difficult to get funding out of that. It has to be an Italian film, sort of.
There's a question, yes?
I get about 8 and get started. Yeah, I used to get started about 10, but yes, it's easier with a routine. If you've been used to being an actor, it's quite a weird change, because we actors are like cows. We just go moo, and then someone pushes us in the right direction and they milk us. But if you're writing, you're completely on your own. You've got no one to sound off. You've got no one to say to complain to, except for yourself. And so it is. I found that very difficult. You can get very easily discouraged. I'm in a TV show at the moment, actually, that's taking place in Prague. It's a BBC TV show called Musketeers. And yes, I think mostly the future now for actors is in TV. But the thing about it is, and why the actors nowadays are absolutely brilliant. It's very, very fast moving, and sometimes I feel a little bit like Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard, because you do a lot of work each day, and it moves incredibly fast, and you really have to have your wits about you. It's an amazing discipline, actually, working in today's television, and great, actually. And the actors in my one, for example, they're all they're amazing actors. They're kind of quite humbling in a way, because they manage to just turn it on and get and find a way through, whereas I come from a tradition in cinema making which is much more tortoise-like, much slower, really. And this new one is good. It's quite exciting. I don't know, not in Germany probably, but because they don't have English tours very much in Germany, do they? Oh, actually they do. There's stuff. Musicals happen a lot in Germany, don't they? But I'm doing a play in the play I did about Oscar Wilde a couple of years ago. I'm doing it in New York next year, and in Canada.
Thank you. There was one here. Yes.
I think I would have a model as a director, but I know as an actor what kind of director works best. And funny enough, because I'm in this TV series at the moment, and what you do, there's a different director for every 2 episodes, and the same actors, and actors love to sit around and complain about everything they possibly can. So we all sit around discussing, how bad or how good the new director is. And what I have learned, I've always known actually, is it's the same in everything. If you want to get something really good out of someone, there's a really good way of doing it, and there's a bad way of doing it. And lots of directors actually have the worst way of directing actors. They they never let the actors feel like they're having the ideas themselves. I think my experience as an actor directing my film is going to be the thing that I hope will be kind of key.
Yeah.
Oh, Ben.
I was dying. I did have an epiphany. When I was about 7 years old, or 6, I went to a local cinema and I watched Mary Poppins. Then I wanted to become an actress, I'm afraid. And even more than that, I wanted to be in that. The epiphany was really that, and it was also a lot to do with curtains, because I don't know whether it's the same in Germany, but in England, in the old days, in the big old theatres, they had these kind of pink, coral-coloured silk curtains. And if anyone had been listening, they must have known I was a queen, because I was like, I couldn't believe these silk curtains. And they had lights on them from underneath, and it was just, I'd never seen anything like it. Our curtains at home were nothing like this. And the film used to be projected while the curtains were still closed, so there was a kind of ripple in it. You felt completely the opposite of what in fact was happening. It felt like the film was coming out at you, And actually, that's how performers, the great stars, their performances come through the screen at you, as opposed to how it actually comes, which is bouncing off the screen. And it was Mary Poppins. I mean, I know it's not very kind of actors' studio-ish. It was Mary Poppins that started me out. No, I don't. Apart from this thing that I just am desperate to do, I don't have a preference. No, I think just even having still being here and getting a job is kind of miraculous. You know, because seriously, to keep going in show business now, when it's so fast moving, is not that easy actually, because you have to keep having product, you have to keep doing things. You can't afford to take a year off or not get a job for a year. People will just simply have forgotten where you were, who you are. So I think it's a very competitive business, and I feel, and it's a great business if it works out for you. I feel just lucky to be doing anything, really, in one sense, seriously. What do I think about everyone's obsession about the royal family? I think it's quite simple. She represents something which also film stars and musicians do, that you're able to look at yourself in those people. She's been around for everybody's whole lifetime. So it's rather like that thing they say that everyone remembers where they were when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And those kind of experiences, and it's also like when you hear on the radio a record which you fell in love to or something like that. It's an amazing connection. And I think what people like her do, and why she's so popular and quite clever, is that you can relate your own life somehow to her, because she's been around. You can remember her in the background of every single thing that's happened to you if you want. And I think from the German point of view, it's also a nostalgia for you know, all the little tiny states, the Schleswig-Holsteins, the Hohenzollerns, the this and that's that have been rejected, but still it's a kind of world that is still absolutely fascinating. And she's terribly clever, because there she goes. She walks around with this very glum face. She's like Andy Warhol, but 10 times more. You know. And yet she brings with her this mystique, which we in cinema and in music we don't have anymore, because we've been tweeting and Facebooking diuretically for the last 10 years. We really don't have any more mystery left, but she does have some mystery. There's shadows in her and things that engage our fantasy, and I think I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's rather sweet, and it's for us, the English, of course, it's thrilling that she had a great success in Berlin. And you know, we were all on the edge of our seats to see how her and Angela were going to get along. Whether she was going to go to Matzinger. Where does Angela live? Mecklenburg.
So I think we have time for one more question. So yes.
Well, first of all, I think if you're going to be anything like, well, anything anyway, you should never take any advice or give any. Anyone who takes somebody else's advice is fucked, as far as I'm concerned, because you've got to think for yourself what you're going to do, particularly in a career like acting. And I think that's what sometimes makes people a little bit difficult, because you have to rely on yourself. You have to be the answers yourself. If someone else is telling you, oh, you should do this, it's always bad advice, I think. So my feeling is never give advice or take any. Working with Madonna was an amazing experience. We did a film, more amazing in a way, was working with Madonna and John Schlesinger. John Schlesinger was the director of the film we made, and he was a great friend of mine and a hero of mine, because some of his movies are my very, very favourite films. And I got him onto the film with me and Madonna, and the whole thing was just one disaster after another. And at one point, Madonna had to do a kissing scene with the love interest, and she was very nervous, and she'd had a drink. And she was a bit drunk, and John Schlesinger said from behind the camera, "Well, someone throw a bucket of water on that slit." One of the most incredibly rude things. And it was everything. It was the story in my life where everything, I had all the cards at the beginning, and one by one everything went wrong. But it was also very funny, and a great experience working with her. But Julia Roberts was in a film that was made by someone in control. PJ Hogan is also another really fine film director. So My Best Friend's Wedding, it was called. And PJ Hogan, who also is a fabulous guy, was in control stage of his life. John Schlesinger he was a fantastic director, but it was just too much for him. He was too old. At some points we'd be doing scenes and he'd fall asleep during the we'd finish the acting and we'd kind of wait for someone to say cut, and you'd hear from behind the monitor, because he was a person who wasn't used to watching a monitor. He hated watching a monitor, but at the same time he was too old to come and watch the action, and he thought there was nothing more boring for him than sitting in front of the monitor. And he would sometimes fall asleep and stuff like that. It was just it was not a successful venture.
Of course, we could go on slipping on many banana peels with you for another hour or two, but
we have to go.
We have to go. Thank you so much.